we're getting pretty used to these fake Christians from the Labor Party turning up to church in election time and then throwing Christianity under the bus in their legislative agenda. And today we're going to talk about someone who is actually pretty good at pulling this ruse, and that's Peter Malinauskas, the Premier of South Australia. And that's today on The Dr. Joe Show. So before we get into the show today, could I please ask that you hit the subscribe button? The more people that support the show and subscribe to the channel, the bigger it becomes. So who is Peter Malinauskas? If you're not from South Australia, perhaps you're not aware of who our Premier is. He is someone that is touted as being a future Prime Minister, and I think that's kind of like the worst kept secret in the South Australian media, that Peter Malinauskas is going to do his stint here, then he's going to get drafted and go into a front bench position and ultimately, become Prime Minister. That's sort of what everybody says is going to happen. I think it's what Peter Malinauskas is going for. And the image that he likes to present, and let's face it, he's doing a very good job of this. The Liberal Party has not been able to even get a scratch, on him. Like they've not been able to dent him at all, and the media does love him. The image that he likes to present that's been very carefully curated is, he's a dad, a family man, an average footy player, a weekend gardener. That's who Peter Malinauskas likes to tell us he is. And, there's all these pictures of him as a church-going man. He's part of the Christians in Parliament prayer group. There's always these photos of him, looking like a man of the people. He's a social conservative is something that people say about him. And yet, when it comes down to it, what I've realised is he's actually just as radical left as all of the people that we expose on this show. And so in this episode, it's not going to be something that you hear about from the media, but I'm going to forensically go through how he has conducted himself and leave it to you guys to decide. So when abortion up to birth was being debated in South Australia, this was in 2021, and it was a law that the Liberal Party, the Marshall government with Vicky Chapman, the Liberal Attorney General, had been really pushing forward. It was still a private member's bill, so it wasn't a government bill, but there were very left-wing Liberals that were pushing this bill. And at the time, Peter Malinauskas was the opposition leader. He was sort of, I guess, not known very well at this point, but he was doing a pretty good job as opposition leader. Now, he didn't say anything in the parliament. He just turned up to vote. And the way that he voted may feel a little bit confusing to you. And so we're going to explain some of this as the episode goes on. So in 2021, there was this bill about abortion up to birth, and there was an amendment that David Speers from the Liberals introduced. He was the Environment Minister at the time. He introduced an amendment that said after viability, so if a baby was 23 weeks and older, they couldn't be killed unless they had some condition that was incompatible with life or to save the mother's life. So this was an amendment that would have effectively prevented late-term abortions occurring in South Australia. Now, Peter Malinauskas actually voted to ban late-term abortion. He was on the side of David Speers. And then, unfortunately, tragically, that amendment failed, and then the bill itself had a vote at the third reading stage. So this was the whole abortion up to birth bill, and Peter Malinauskas actually voted for that bill to pass. So already you're looking at someone who votes one way on one thing, but then another way that ultimately achieves the outcome that he didn't want when he voted for that other thing. So he was apparently against late-term abortion, but then he voted for the bill that allowed late-term abortion amongst other things. Now, Peter Malinauskas, I think if we were to ask him, would say, well, I didn't think abortion should be in the criminal code. I think it should be decriminalised. That's why I voted for the bill. But he can't hide away from the fact that that was a bill that allowed abortion up to birth, and he actually voted for it. Now, at the time, myself and others were trying to make sense of what Peter Malinauskas did. And, the Australian Christian Lobby, when they were giving voter guidance before the state election, they actually gave Stephen Marshall, the leader of the Liberals, who voted for abortion up to birth, so he voted against the David Speers amendment and he voted for the bill. to allow abortion up to birth, they gave him an F and they gave Peter Malinauskas an A star. And I remember I was doing a scorecard with a friend and we were having arguments back and forth because I was saying that he deserved a great rating because he voted against abortion up to birth for the Spears Amendment. But she was saying to me, no, Joe, he's just as bad. He's just played the political game and he's just as bad as Marshall. And so we had this big argument back and forth. And I was actually on the side of Peter Malinauskas because I genuinely believed what he said, which was, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Christian, I'm a family man, I'm against abortion up to birth. That's why he voted for the Spears Amendment. And that the only reason he didn't vote against the whole bill was because he wanted it out of the criminal code. So I took him at his word and even had this argument with a friend about the scorecard that we were producing. But when I really saw who Peter Malinauskas was last year when, with Ben Hood, I helped draft a bill, and I did it with other legal and medical experts. It was a bill that we called the Live Births Bill, and it said that after 28 weeks and up until birth, killing the baby would be banned, but that the baby could be induced alive and given care, given up for adoption, but that after 28 weeks and up until 40, that would be banned. Now, I assumed that Peter Malinauskas, because he had voted for the Spears Amendment, that he would actually be supportive of that and he would welcome that as a way of moderating South Australia's really extreme abortion laws. But that wasn't the response we got from Peter Malinauskas.
We're 6 weeks into Vincent Tarzier's leadership and we've got a Liberal Party brawl that's happening internally over reforms that they initiated on abortion.
So he's at a press conference and he gets asked about the Live Births Bill, and that's what he says. So he says, we're 6 weeks into Vincent Tarzier's leadership and he's already getting into internal warfare about abortion. Now, if he genuinely was a good person, like the person he pretends that he is, like if he was actually someone that cared about children, or actually against late-term abortion, which is what he led us to believe when he voted for the Spears Amendment in 2021. That's not the statement he would have given. He would have said he wouldn't have played politics with it. Essentially what Peter Malinauskas is doing is using this to get a hit on Vincent Tarzier, who's the Liberal opposition leader. He's saying, well, this is a Liberal Party bill, it's Ben Hood, and the Liberal Party is erupting into warfare again. Now, be that as it may, like it actually is true. The Liberal Party did erupt on itself because all of these lefties in the party, like Michelle Lenzik, just couldn't cope with the fact that babies after 28 weeks were going to be saved under this bill. So that's true that the Liberal Party was erupting. But if you were truly a good person, someone that was actually against late-term abortion, someone that genuinely believed in the human rights of these babies, you wouldn't give that statement. You wouldn't play politics yourself in that moment. In his state, where he is the premier, babies have no human rights all the way up until birth. In the first 18 months of these laws, 45 healthy babies had their hearts injected with potassium chloride and then labour was induced and they were delivered dead. But Peter Malinauskas, he won't stand up. He did not stand up in that moment. And in fact, look at a tweet he made on pretty much the same day that he made that statement to the press. He wrote, "We're one step closer to banning puppy factories in South Australia." Puppy factories. Like, it's not that I don't care about puppies. Puppies are cute and we shouldn't be abusing them either. But we're talking about human babies. Like, I'm presuming he was present at the birth of his children, his 4 children. He knows what that looks like. And yet in the state where he is the premier, when a bill gets introduced to modify just slightly these really extreme laws that allow a baby to be killed right up until birth, he gets up and says, oh, well, this is just the Liberal Party being pathetic and blowing itself up. That's his statement.
It's hit a wall in terms of its political consciousness amongst the South Australian people. This is just not a priority of the state government.
Honestly, can't get over how much of a pathetic douchebag this guy is. Like, there he is, like, pretending to be Christian on a Sunday, parading in all of these photo ops with religious leaders. And then when he's asked about this really important bill, he's like, well, it's not a priority. It's hit a wall in terms of the consciousness of the Australian people. Now, the reason the South Australian people just don't know what to think about this bill is because they've been lied to by a media establishment that tells them it's forced birth. there's no leadership from the Premier himself, who says he's a Christian, who turns up to Christian prayer, but then when the moment comes, he chooses to place his political ambitions above the babies. Like, that's actually what Peter Malinauskas is doing there. Let's be clear about this. He knows he needs the powerful left faction of the party, which is now the most dominant faction nationally. You know, that's why Albanese is the leader and not someone like Bill Shorten, who's on the right. Albanese is the leader of the socialist left faction. He is the Prime Minister. Malinauskas knows that that's the faction that is dominant. If he's ever going to jump into federal politics, he needs their support. His deputy, Susan Close, is pro-abortion. All of these people like that he has the votes of, they are the votes that he needs. So essentially what he's doing, what I think he is doing, because presumably he didn't always start out like this, but he is selling his soul for power, and he's throwing the babies under the bus. And he's saying it's hit a wall and it's not a priority. But, you know, his priority is the animals, apparently, like the dogs, the little puppies, and then even intervening for this pub. So one of the things we talked about in this debate was that there was this pub, the Cranker, that was being shut down. Peter Malinauskas personally intervened to save the Cranker, and yet he couldn't personally intervene at all to even say one positive thing about this very moderate bill. This bill still allowed women to end their pregnancy right up until birth. So they were still able to do that, but it did not give them a right to a dead baby in the third trimester. And Peter Malinauskas couldn't even support that.
They're obsessed with this stuff. I mean, this party just seems to be only interested in finding ways to perpetuate the culture wars.
Let's examine what he's really saying when he talks about the culture wars. The culture is dominated by the radical left. The pro-abortion culture that we have, the gender ideology culture that we have, where boys are allowed to play girls' sports, where abortion is allowed up until birth for any reason. All of this, the culture where prayer is banned if you've got a child that's struggling with their sexuality and they ask you for prayer in your own home. This is the culture that we are operating in. And Peter Malinauskas says, it's just the culture wars when Ben Hood introduces a bill that saves babies in the third trimester. That's his response. And, you know, it's lapped up by a left-wing media establishment that is also part of this radical left culture. And, you know, as I've said on this show time and time again, I am in the culture wars. You and I, we are in this battle for this culture because the culture has been lost. The left has well and truly won. And Peter Malinauskas knows that if he wants to keep winning, if he wants to keep being Premier, and if he wants to one day be Prime Minister, then to have power means he has to squash something like this. Even if in a tiny corner of his heart he thinks, yeah, that's probably a good idea not to kill babies with potassium chloride after 28 weeks, he just squashes that because, you know, to exist in this culture, you have to be you have to perpetuate the radical left ideology. You cannot deviate from it from a second in one tiny moment, and he knows that. This is not a courageous man. This is not the actions of a leader. This is cowardly. It's pathetic. He knows where his political capital comes from, and he is too cowardly to stand up for the truth and for justice and fairness and equality, for the dignity of these babies. He's too cowardly to do that because he just wants power.
Senior Labor MPs have described the move as absurd.
This is really extreme right-wing stuff that we're seeing from the Liberal Party, and I think most South Australians are pretty shocked that this is now entering our politics.
So this is the Health Minister, Chris Picton, who is singing from the same hymn sheet as Peter Malinauskas, that this is the culture wars, this is extreme right-wing stuff. Let's look at actually what this is about. You know, I've said it, I feel like a broken record because I had to speak to journalist after journalist and politician after politician about what this bill was about because, yes, I acknowledge it was a world first bill. It was a historic bill. It was something that had never been thought of before. But in all seriousness, it was incredibly mild. You know, like the David Spears amendment that Peter Malinauskas was apparently so pro-life that he voted for that amendment. That was more extreme than this because the Spears Amendment said that you just couldn't terminate your pregnancy after 23 weeks. that was inaccessible. And Peter Malinauskas was apparently so pro-life that he voted for that. Now, this live births bill that Chris Picton is saying is an extreme right-wing bill that apparently South Australians are shocked by, and there was no evidence of that, because when the other side did rallies, they could barely muster up a crowd of a couple of hundred. Like that was honestly the case. And they'd stay for 20 minutes. They did 2 rallies. They lasted for like a total of 20 minutes and then they were over. And yet on our side, we had, 5,000 people attend our 2 rallies and there was clear momentum. So when they say, South Australians are shocked by how extreme this is, that's just them making it up and the media just repeating it verbatim. But the Spears Amendment banned terminating the pregnancy after 23 weeks. This bill actually allowed terminating the pregnancy after 28 weeks. It just stopped you from killing the baby. And I just 2 weeks ago came across a journal article because I was researching fetal pain and I was trying to understand what is the experience of a baby when they get injected in the 3rd trimester. What is that like? And there was this one journal article that was quite significant and keeps appearing in the literature. And so I had a look at it. And in that journal article, they actually show the facial expressions of a baby or of babies, because they did a control group and they then did a group that wasn't injected, and they studied both groups. And these were babies in their 3rd trimester. And they actually showed the facial expressions of babies when they were injected in the upper thigh with anesthesia, so with pain relief. And that's prior to some kind of fetal surgery. So these were babies that were sick, they had something wrong with them, and they were slated for some kind of in utero surgery. But prior to that taking place, they were injected with pain relief in the thigh. Now, this journal article, for the first time, did 4D imaging of these babies' faces at the time of the injection. And then with the control group, they showed what these babies would be like, what they would be doing if there wasn't any injection at all. And even just from the images, you can see, the furrowed eyebrows, the lips getting pursed, and what looks like quite significant distress. And admittedly, it would be momentary for these babies because it is a sedative. It's something that's going to relieve their pain. But even in that moment of the injection, it's very clear they're experiencing pain. But as I was looking at this article that had been referenced by many other articles, and it wasn't in the context of abortion, so it wasn't criticised. It had been peer-reviewed, it was published, it was respected, it had been cited. But at the very bottom, it actually said that there was supplementary video evidence available. I clicked on that thinking, this is interesting, and I'm going to show you what I saw. So the researchers used words like furrowed eyebrows, pursed lips, but to anyone watching this, to you guys, to me as I watch this, it's very clear this is a baby in pain. This is a baby screaming. It's a baby crying. It's a baby who's scared, who's whimpering. And this is at the moment in the 3rd trimester when they're getting injected in the thigh with pain relief. And this is their response. Now, Imagine the excruciating pain of getting injected in the heart with potassium chloride or digoxin, a highly poisonous substance that doesn't kill you straight away. It can take minutes, it can sometimes take hours, it sometimes fails and they have to go in for a second injection of digoxin or potassium chloride into the heart. And this baby is now in excruciating pain because there was no pain relief given prior. And this is their facial expression. And it's not moments like it would be for the babies in this study. It's actually going on for minutes or hours. And on death row, where they use those same substances, digoxin or potassium chloride, to kill rapists and murderers who've been convicted of a crime, not innocent babies, there's actually a 3-drug cocktail. They give the prisoner pain relief first to make sure that they don't feel the excruciating pain, the heart-burning sensation that happens when you get injected with these poisons. And now I'm going to play you the control group. So this is what a baby really should look like at 33 weeks if they're not faced with some injection. So all of this is just heartbreaking. When I came across these videos just quite recently, it was honestly a massive wake-up call, even for me. And you guys know I live and breathe this stuff, but just seeing that was just a massive wake-up call for me. That, you know, as I go to bed at night and sleep in my comfortable bed, as I wake up in the morning and make myself a cup of tea and I sit in my home and I go to work, that there are babies all across this country who are experiencing that in the name of healthcare, that there are women going in for a late-term abortion, never being told that that is what their baby is experiencing. And there are a handful of abortionists, because let's face it, it is literally, you could count it on one or two hands maximum in the country, the psychopaths who are monstrous enough to inject a live baby's heart with potassium chloride, to watch them on an ultrasound and to see that baby writhe and struggle in pain, and to have that face where they're crying, and just, it's just mind blowing. There's a few people that do this, and the rest of us, we just live in ignorance or we're silent. And so for me, it was a wake up call to go, well, you know, no, I'm not going to ever stop doing this, no matter what happens to me. I am not going to stop speaking up for these babies, and I'm going to call out the people like Peter Malinauskas who are in positions of leadership, who, when the moment comes and a bill gets introduced which saves these babies from a fate worse than death, you know, that saves them from being tortured like the torture that happened on Guantanamo Bay, and the world decried it because it was just so monstrous. And yet this is legal and it's happening. And Peter Malinauskas, when he had a chance to lead, a chance to stop it, a chance to speak up for those babies, instead he just poo-pooed it, he threw cold water on it. He did everything he could to quash it. That's what he did. And he chose his power and his ambitions over the babies. And so don't fall for the hype. Don't fall for the I'm just an average guy act. Don't fall for the I'm a Christian act. When the election happens next year in South Australia in March, and one day all of you might get a chance to vote or not vote for this guy if he's, you know, got ambitions for the lodge. Don't fall for the act. We have to stop falling for radically left Labor politicians manipulating us into thinking that they're just ordinary people who care for the things that we care about, because they don't. They serve and perpetuate a radical left agenda. And Peter Malinauskas is either actively pursuing and perpetuating that agenda, or he is a coward, a slimy politician who puts himself and his career above doing what's right. And that's today on The Dr. Jo Show.